Z68APD3 Revision 2 motherboard for a UEFI boot into macOS Sierra. First, download Rufus. Second, download the BIOS UA9 UEFI BIOS. Third, plug in a USB. Select the following settings in the Rufus Manager. Be sure to focus on the free DOS as well as BIOS or UEFI section. Next, continue with that, and you should receive a USB pop-up in Windows that appears like this. The final step is to move the BIOS download updater onto the same USB and note the name of the file. So with this file name, you're going to restart your computer and boot from the USB. This is what it will look like when you boot from the USB. Once you're in here, you're going to want to type the file name into the command prompt and hit enter. Your BIOS will then update and you will now be ready to continue on with the UniBeast installation. Today I will be explaining how to get a UniBeast boot drive working, specifically for the Z68APD3 revision 2. Now this BIOS has been updated to UA9. Now it is worth noting that this is not the same computer, as all you require to make your UniBeast boot drive is a bootable version of OS 10. So that means any working Mac computer or any working Hackintosh computer that can get you to the desktop and run any simple application. So just for a little bit of background information, this is my Hackintosh that I have currently working on the Z97XSLi, and I have an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 760, 247 megabytes of dedicated graphics RAM. I also have 16 gigabytes of RAM in here, and I'm running 2 SSDs, dual booting Windows 10 and macOS Sierra. So if you're interested in getting any of these specifications running for a Hackintosh, stay tuned to my next video, as I felt it was more interesting for me to run an older version of Hackintosh. Like, as for the Z68APD3 revision 2, this is my very first ever Hackintosh, and I actually built a couple of them after I built the first one, and this was way back on OS X Lion. So the other day I thought it'd be interesting to upgrade my BIOS and get UEFI support with macOS Sierra. Now this took me weeks to do, as I had midterms and projects and many other things on my plate, but in all of my free time I would come home and I would get it running. So if you're interested in this specific setup, stay tuned for my later video, which shows you how to get this running. Although this is much easier of a boot to get working than the older one, as in there's more steps since it's an older version. But anyways, getting back to the main topic, when concerned with the Z68APD3 revision 2 BIOS UA9, after you've already updated it with the DOS USB, the next thing you're going to want to do is make sure you have macOS Sierra downloaded from the App Store in your applications folder. After that, you're going to want to go ahead and register at TonyMacX86 and show your support by not resubmitting their files anywhere other than just being a good member on their forum and using their software, specifically from their download links. So once you have UniBeast 7 downloaded to your computer, as well as macOS 10 Sierra, what you're going to want to do is open up your UniBeast drive, or UniBeast app, sorry, my apologies. And before you go any further here, there's one more step that you must complete. Make sure your 8 gigabyte or larger USB is connected to your computer, and then you're going to want to go into your utilities and open up disk utility. Now what you're going to want to do is make sure you have the right USB selected, click on partition, and select GUID partition map and Mac OS 10 journaled. Then you're going to want to hit erase or format, or whatever the case may be, and once it pops back up here and back up on your desktop as a blank USB drive with the GUID partition map, you're going to want to go ahead and go into UniBeast once again, hit continue, and agree, and select that USB drive. Now, since I already have this USB drive created, I will not be showing you the full steps, although all you need to do after you hit continue is select UEFI instead of legacy. If you wish to still run a legacy support setup, I will not be able to offer you support, as macOS 10 Sierra seemed very difficult for me to run in legacy, and I ended up being forced to update my BIOS. So anyways, once you have this USB drive completed, you will have it on your desktop just like this, although these two folders will not be here. Now, I decided to place my multi-beast inside here, as well as my USB Wi-Fi driver. That way, when my new installation boots up, I will have this available to me since I don't have internet or my computer is not near an Ethernet source, I'll be able to run multi-beast and run my Kext for my Wi-Fi immediately. So moving on, once you have this USB drive, there's one more thing that you need to be aware of. Updating from Chimera to Clover, there are a couple changes. So this USB drive now has an EFI partition associated with it, which the UniBeast drive has created. So if you open up Clover Configurator and you click on Mount EFI, and click check partitions so that you're aware of which partition it is. So as you can see, I have a Windows 10 drive, I have a Macintosh SSD, but that's not what we're concerned for. We don't want the EFI partition for the Macintosh SSD, not just yet anyways, because you're booting on a version of any Mac computer that is not related to your Hackintosh, right? So you're going to want to look at these disks and find the one for the drive that you have created in UniBeast. So you go down here and you read that it is disk 3, and the EFI partition is on 3.1. So if I go ahead and click Mount EFI Partition, and I click on 3.1, it's going to pop up once I mount it as EFI. So if it's named anything other than EFI, that means you've selected the wrong partition. So notice how that this EFI partition also has the same type of icon as the USB icons. That means we have the correct version. If you wanted to edit the Clover boot drive that's installed on your hard drive, which we will be doing later once you've already installed OS X to your hard drive, then you would want it to be the EFI partition of this hard drive. But anyways, once you have this mounted, you can open this up manually, or you can open it up here by clicking Open Partition, and when you go into it, into the EFI Clover, you'll notice that there is a config.plist. Now this is exactly how the computer reads when it's, this is exactly how Clover reads your boot information when it's starting. So if you open this with a Clover configurator, you'll be able to modify the settings right from the USB. So once you have done that, if there's any certain specific modifications you would like to make to your computer before you install OS X, specifically for the USB, you should do it now. So once you have made your specific changes, even though our specific motherboard, so Z68APD3 revision 2 BIOS UA9, requires no changes here as of when you install the UniBeast drive. I'm just showing you this, as you can still change the theme, you could change the default boot, you could change any of these options right from here. So going back to the motherboard boot, all you're going to want to do from this point forward is make sure your computer is set to boot in the UEFI boot mode, as well as a boot override to this specific USB drive. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned to continue the setup. Okay. Alright, so you've updated your BIOS to the UA9 version. Now the next thing you want to do is head over to the save and exit portion and load the optimized defaults. Now, once you've done this process, all you want to do is go and change a couple settings that are in this menu. So first things first, go to peripherals and make sure the SATA mode is at AHCI. Now, go all the way down to onboard USB 3 controller. Disable this for the OS X installation process. It can be re-enabled later, and I'll show you the settings that work in MultiBeast. Now, go down to Marvel ATA controller and make sure this is also set to AHCI. Now go back and go to BIOS features. Ensure that the OS type is Other OS, and all of these settings are set to UEFI only, except for this LAN PXE boot is disabled. Once this is completed, go into MIT current status, sorry, the one below that, advanced frequency settings as well as advanced memory settings, and change both of these to profile 1 for extreme memory profile. Now you can exit with saving, sorry. And once this is done, You're going to want to hit F12 or delete one more time. That way you can do a boot override onto the USB. See how it says PNY USB 2.0 right here? This will boot OS X Clover bootloader for Sierra. Now, it says external, that means it's the USB, and that's exactly what we want to boot and install macOS X Sierra. Hit that like you see here. Now, by the way, this is with the Clover set to UEFI boot option, and like I said before, there were no other settings modified to boot this. As you can see, I changed nothing in the Clover configurator file. All I did was use the UEFI boot option, and it's booting. Just to show you one more time, this is the Z68APD3 running the AMD 6850. Now, as for how well this card handles itself in OS X, I've had about 2 weeks using this steady now on macOS Sierra, and about the last 3 years straight on this specific PC for a Hackintosh build specifically, as well as Windows. And this card has definitely held out quite well. But this computer actually is not like my newer Hackintosh, and it's running 2 regular hard drives. So I have 1 hard drive in there for Windows, and I've got 1 in there for OS X. That's why the boot times aren't exactly insane. But this is booting off the USB right now, so just as anticipated, it is a bit slow. But I'll cut this video and I'll show you guys once I get to the install screen. Okay, so just about 5 seconds later, we get greeted with this nice screen here. So we click on the continue button, and the next thing we want to do, once this loads itself, is you want to go to utilities up here and click disk utility. Once you see this, as you can see, I already have my Hackintosh completely configured, so I will not be going fully through with this process, but just listen to as I explain this, and it shouldn't be too difficult for you to finish it for yourself. So what you want to do is just note that this is the macOS installer USB. This is my Windows hard drive. It's not completely recognized in OS X. And this is the OS X hard drive right here. So I have a recovery partition, I have a Time Machine backup partition, and I also have my macOS Sierra HD. So the way to get this set up is to click on the main hard drive, not the partition, and then you click on partition. And as you do that, you're greeted with like a pie type scenario, and you create the names of the partitions. And you can get away with even just 1 partition for 1 hard drive if you have no other plans for backups or anything like that. But because this computer does have some kernel modification or kex modifications, and stuff like that, I'd just like to keep a small backup partition which holds usually 1 or 2 Time Machine backups without my music files and movie files and stuff like that, just so that I don't have to spend too much time redoing this stuff. The only time I ever have to redo a Hackintosh build is a substantial update, but I've let this update sit for about 2 or 3 years, so it was good timing for this update. The UEFI started to get much more updated BIOS versions for this board, so it ended up working out nicely. So if you hit continue, agree, and then you select your OS partition that you've created. I didn't mention, but by the way, when you're in disk utility here, you want to make sure you format the hard drive partition to GUID, as well as you're going to change this to macOS Extended Journaled. As long as you have both of those settings, everything will be good. You're just going to hit continue and install, and as soon as that is done, this is exactly what will happen. Your computer will restart from here, and then one more. So your computer has now restarted after installing macOS 10 Sierra. You're going to want to hit the delete button again, or F12, and you need to boot override back to that same USB that you installed macOS Sierra from. Once you have done this, you're going to want to boot off of the install partition that you created in disk utility, not the same installation choice as the original click. You're going to want to go over and click on, for mine it's called macOS Sierra HD, so that's what I'm going to boot from. But I'm not going to bother booting from the USB, as my partition on my computer already has a version of Clover installed in it. But pretend that you hit enter on your macOS 10. Alright guys, I'm back here on the desktop. So this is in fact the Z68APD3 revision 2 board running the UA9 BIOS, and this is still the exact same BIOS settings as the ones I showed you in the beginning of the video. So obviously I have installed multi-beast settings as well as gotten the Clover bootloader running, but I'm going to go ahead and show you about this Mac really quickly one more time. And as soon as you guys have a minute to process this, I'm going to show you how to attain these this full potential, I guess, of this computer. So if you open up Multi-Beast 9, these are the settings you're going to want to pick. So I have them listed all out here, as well as the ones you need just right here. So if you go to Quick Start, make sure you select UEFI BIOS mode or boot mode. In drivers, you need ALC 889 and optional port 5.1. Disk, nothing there, don't worry about. Miscellaneous, select all 3 fake SMC. Network, you're going to need one from all 3, so pay attention. Next, under USB, you need 789 series USB support. So this allows the USB 3 that I was talking about to begin with. Bootloaders, you're going to need the UEFI boot mode, nothing's different there. Under Customize, you can select the Intel HD 3000, although I don't recommend it if you have the ATI card, as it's kind of a waste, unless you need another monitor. Under the SSDT options, select Sandybridge Core i7, and only if you have the Sandybridge Core i7 like me, the 2600K. Next, you need the iMac 14.2 setting. And then you're going to want to go ahead and click Build. Now this is going to be on the same partition that you installed your macOS Sierra to. So close that once it's completed and open up Clover Configurator. This EFI partition will not already be mounted, but what you're going to want to do is click on Check Partition and mount your EFI partition for the hard drive in which your macOS Sierra is installed to. So once you've done that, you click on Open Partition. It will show you the hard drive file. Click on EFI, click on Clover, and then open the config.plist, and it will take you inside of Clover Configurator, just like this. Now pay attention, as I'm going to run through these settings that I have enabled really quickly. You're going to want to fix HDA and fix SATA, as well as LAN down here in the ACPI section. Now, for the boot section, you're going to want to enable Dart equals 0, rootless equals 0, kex dev mode equals 1. You're going to want to keep the legacy PBR boot, and you're going to want to add your default boot volume to macOS Sierra. I like to change my timeout to about 7 seconds. It's just long enough for me to change it if I need it and not notice it if I don't. So for devices, you're going to want to change audio inject to 2. Disable drivers, don't worry about that. GUI, change the language to English so it doesn't have to think about it, just make it that much quicker. Get rid of legacy unless you're booting some older version of Windows drives, but I've had problems with that, so I've changed my theme to Apple style, and I've actually made a couple modifications to the theme, and I am working on a new theme since the since I was able to get my BIOS updated and upgraded my Clover resolution. So now, as you can see, it's 1920 by 1080 resolution, even on boot. So that's got me excited, and I've made a new theme for it. But getting back to the Clover settings, change the frame buffer name to Duckweed, patch the VBIOS, video ports needs to be 4, and inject ATI. So next, kernel patches, you want to have kernel PM selected, Asus AI CPU PM selected, as well as Apple RT variables, sorry. You want 0 by 28 and 0 by 3 and nothing else to worry about. SM BIOS, you're going to want to have it as iMac 1412 like we said before. And in system parameters, you're going to want to have inject kex set to yes, as well as inject system ID. Now that I've shown you all of these settings, there's one more thing to be interested with. Now for the install drivers aspect, please note that this CSM video DXE is the reason for my bootloader's full resolution. So because of this, I'm able to create a full 1080p Clover bootloader theme for this computer. So stay tuned if you want to see my version of a Clover bootloader theme, although it's not finished yet. So I've just been using other people's themes, which are actually quite amazing. But I just wanted to personalize one, so stay tuned for that. And if you want to boot any version of Windows off of Clover, you need to install these drivers. So take note of what I have selected here, and make sure you have a network connection, and then you can go ahead and install these as you wish. So that being said, I'm just going to confirm that my sound is now working. And I'm going to show you the App Store doing a download, just to prove that this works. So let me go ahead and click download macOS Sierra. I'll show you that this works flawlessly. As you can see, I am signed into my Apple ID, and it does go ahead and download properly as it should. So I don't actually want to do this download, but that's no problem. I can just delete that. But as you can see, everything functions completely normally as a regular Mac would. So please stay tuned for my updated video on the next Hackintosh build. But that's all for now, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully this helps. Stay tuned.